Welcome. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I'm David Cooper. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, the show where no one's listening. No one cares, the show where every episode's the last episode. It is Thursday, which means it's Therapy Thursdays on a Thursday. That's the day where we have this segment on the correct day, which is rare, actually. I prefer Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday or a Tuesday. And what I should do is probably tell you what we're going to cover. Righteous indignation. If you don't know what that is, it's righteous anger. That's when you're entitled to be angry because someone or something has wronged you. But then, well, you behave badly. That'll be with Gary Direnfeld. Then it's all things conspiracy on this show on a little segment I sometimes call Conspiracy Corner with Nathan Radke. And we will cover the topic you've been requesting, you've been thinking about every day. This is a topic that's relevant to, I think, everybody. And that topic is, what do pinball and the Smurfs have to do with the devil, demonic possession? Sound interesting? It's going to be. After that, it's our foreign correspondent all the way across the pond to go over the news in the United Kingdom. I think he's in Brighton or Springdon or Somerden. He's somewhere. And he's Tony 5. It's going to be a great Thursday show. And before we jump into all that, this. Oh, and we are back, and boy, am I busy. Actually, I'm not. There's something in the workplace that you might do with your friends, something called busy bragging. We're going to find out what that is and what it says about you in the workplace by someone who studied that. They are professor of management at the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business in Athens, Georgia. Jessica Roddell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David.
Before we started, I was maybe a minute late to the taping, and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm just so busy right now. You didn't laugh, and you shouldn't have. I'm not funny. Okay, let's go really high level. Rigorously, or not so rigorously, define busy bragging. Because before I read about this, I had no idea what that was.
Well, we define it as the explicit direct communication that people have with others about how stressed they are in a direct manner. So it's when they purposely call attention to their stress as if it's a badge of honor or something they should be proud of.
I hear that. My family used to do that a lot to me growing up. But this can also happen at the workplace. Someone who you need to get something little done, and they just say, I was too busy to do it. I'm just too busy right now. They're always talking about how busy and stressed they are. And it's kind of like if someone's really intelligent. You know how you know they're really intelligent? If they tell you. I feel like when people are actually busy, it should be obvious. We don't actually hear, I'm so busy, I'm so busy.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the impetus for this study is myself and a couple of doctoral students I was working with at the time were just chit-chatting in the office about hearing that type of conversation go on. And we thought, well, we all have the same job. How are you so busy and so overwhelmed and so stressed? And why are you talking about it? And what do you think that conveys to everybody else? And I don't think it conveys what you think it conveys. And so we decided we wanted to dig into it a little more.
And I know your study, you'll tell me and correct me if I'm wrong, focuses more of it in the corporate world. But you hear this a lot from new parents. It's like they're the first people who've ever had a child and they're the most busy people. Have you have friends like that, those kind of parents?
Yeah, I might have been that. I was the most stressed new parent I'd ever seen.
My older brother's like that. No one has ever had a child that's as stressed. Anyway, okay. So how did you actually end up collecting the data? What was your methodology? Tell me more about the study.
Sure. There's actually two studies that are built into here. One of them was a laboratory experiment where we really wanted to isolate stress, especially because we realized, well, you could just talk about stress because you're stressed, or you might have real friends in the workplace and you want to vent and just honestly talk about how stressed you are. And some of our pilot data, we really dug into, do people know the difference? If you're talking to me about stress, can I tell if you're just talking about stress or if you're bragging about stress? And surprisingly, most people can. And it's nuance and tone and choice of words and the relationship that you have. But people were pretty funny and adamant about how they knew that it was stress bragging versus talking about stress. So then we set up these different conditions where we had some people read about and reply to this fictitious coworker that was bragging about how stressed they were and how much they had to do. And another one that was responding to someone who was just talking about and honestly about their stress. And two other comparisons, if you ever want to hear about them, that are just for rigor in the study, and asked people, what they thought of this person that they were interacting with. So that's the design of the experiment. And we saw, as you said, we just think when people brag about their stress that we think they're not as smart and we don't like them as much as the other people. And there are consequences to that, which we didn't do in the lab study, but we did more in our field study where we asked actual pairs of coworkers to report about their behaviors and their partner coworkers' behaviors over a course of 2 months, and use that to look at, okay, well, if you think they're less competent and less likable, what are the consequences of it? And the consequences are like, I don't want to go out of my way for you. I'm less willing to help you when you need it or talk positively about you to the higher ups. And so it strains the workplace relationships.
That's so amazing, because I'm trying to think what people are trying to communicate when they say they're busy. I'm sure it's a bunch of different things, but basically they're looking for sympathy. They're looking for support. They're looking for maybe you to pick up some slack, do some extra work. That would be the reason I would busy brag. But what we're basically saying to the people who we're doing it to is the opposite, and it's getting the opposite effect. Isn't that so curious? It's like when people are so desperate for friends, we don't want to be friends with them. What is it about the human condition when we desperately want something and the way we go about it, we get the opposite?
I know. I think that happens a lot. I mean, bragging in general backfires, right? We think, oh, I need to show people that I'm competent. We have two fundamental desires with social evaluations. We want other people to think we're competent and that we're warm. So we're smart and we're likable. And that's really what most of us are looking for in any interaction. And oftentimes there's this trade-off between the two. I can make you think I'm smart, but you're going to like me less for it. Or I'm going to be very likable and relatable, but I come across as kind of not so smart or competent. And people are trying to find the balance between those things. And I think with stress bragging, they're trying to do that. I want to show you, oh, I have so much to do and I'm valued around here and I have a lot of responsibility. That would say I'm smart. But I don't want to just come out and say, like, I'm important here, because that would make me not likable. And so by trying to walk this line of, I'm showing you that I'm great and I have a lot to offer here, but I don't want you to dislike me, we think we're going to get the best of both worlds. And it turns out we get the worst in both of those.
That's so curious. Is there something about corporate culture that either encourages or discourages this behavior? Are there environments where it happens more or less?
Yeah, I'm going to speculate a little, and a piece of this didn't wind up in the paper, but we did study the culture that, yes, there are some cultures, organizational cultures, where this is more likely. I personally think in studying this that people are looking to quantify their contributions and worth at work. And as our work has gotten more intangible, it's harder at the end of the day to be like, yes, I did something. I contributed today. I added value. And now we're using stress as a measuring stick. If I go home and I feel overwhelmed and burnt out, I know that I must have done some good work today. I contributed something to this organization. And so stress has kind of become this measuring stick that we're then using and glorifying in the workplace as that comparison to see how we're doing and show other people how we're doing. Right? Which ultimately is, if that continues, it's not great for corporate culture, because stress is bad for our health and our well-being. It hurts our performance in the end. And so want to study this, because I think if we inadvertently continue down this path, it's bad for both employees and companies.
Okay, let's talk about continuing down this path inadvertently. Yeah. Are there alternatives to busy bragging that might communicate to your coworkers, friends, that you're busy, but without coming off like a jerk?
Yeah. I'm going to say, I hope so. I think what we saw is you can communicate about your stress and people respond better to it than bragging about your stress. Now, it's a fine line. I think people in a self-protective way maybe don't want to admit that they're stressed. So they kind of mask it in this brag, thinking, oh, this will be better for me. But it's not. And so I'd like to tell people, don't be passive aggressive about it. Be more vulnerable. If you're stressed, just tell somebody, I'm really overwhelmed and I could use some help. Or if you're proud of something you've accomplished, just say, I'm really proud that I was selected for this, to run this project or to do this job. That we will be perceived better if we're not masking, hiding the intent of our communications.
So be vulnerable or express gratitude,
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. I remember when I was really stressed at the workplace and couldn't handle my you-know-what, and I was going through a divorce at the time, and when my manager pulled me aside to talk about it, I broke down in tears, and that garnered a lot of sympathy, you know?
It does. It does. Being vulnerable. Yeah.
Cry.
Cry.
Cry in the workplace. Look, you're a professor of management. I'm going to ask you a hardball question here. Are there any advice you'd give to managers to mitigate this behavior of their direct reports, their employees?
Oh, that is a good question. And I'm going to sidestep for a second and come back to it. But yes, I think that they need to be paying attention to it, because one piece of our findings we haven't touched on is that there's a spiraling contagious effect of this. So if one person stress brags, not only bad for how others perceive them, it spills over and affects the stress of the next person. And then if they're more likely to brag because now they see it as a positive thing and they feel more stressed, then this can become kind of an epidemic that creates a culture in an organization to all be stressed and all talk about it. And so I think it is important that managers think about it and try to put an end to this spiral and this cycle. How they do that? That is a much more difficult and tough question.
It's an exercise left to the reader. You didn't have room for it in the margins?
I know the next study that we're going to have, I mean, I guess I would start by telling them to do the things we told employees, to be vulnerable and straightforward about their own stress so that they can normalize the conversation, be the role model for the role that stress has and how to deal with it and communicate about it in the workplace is probably a good starting point.
Well, it's a fascinating study. I will stop busy bragging in my personal life, and I appreciate you coming here and talking to me.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on to talk.
What a pleasure. Jessica Roddell, she's a professor of management at the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business. Up next, therapist and social worker Gary Direnfeld for Therapy Thursdays on a Thursday. Gary recently had to send back some food at a restaurant. Now, Gary didn't have righteous anger. He didn't have righteous indignation. But it's something that happens to people, and it's something we're going to go over in just a moment. Oh my goodness. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite hobbies here with Gary Direnfeld, expert in family and marital therapy. Gary, welcome.
Good to be back with you again, David.
This may be an odd day because it's Therapy Thursdays on a Thursday. I say that secretly it's Wednesday when we tape it, but I'm airing it on Thursday. We're airing it on the correct day.
I'm sitting here thinking, what day is this? Yeah, okay, thank you.
And that concludes our lesson on how to tell the day, which is really the only educational part of this show. Complaining. You recently had to send back food. You had a hair in your food. I had a hair in my food yesterday too.
Are you serious?
I did.
What did you do?
Nothing, because I'm either A, a little bitch, or B, I just didn't care and I didn't want to bother and didn't want to get the guy in the kitchen in trouble, and it doesn't bother me that much, I guess. It is gross, I guess, but I have a cat and I've had cat hair in my food. So once you have cat hair in your food, I mean, he licks his butt and then he licks his fur. And I had that in my food and I ate it anyway. So I don't know.
But it's like family. It's okay if it's within family. Isn't that the rule?
It was not a particularly fancy restaurant, Gary, and I just didn't want to cause a fuss. I don't know. Maybe I should have complained. Maybe I'm just a coward. I don't know. I have no problems complaining in most facets of life, but on that day I decided, plus I didn't want to ruin the meal for Miranda because she gets very easily grossed out by these things. So had I pointed out attention for it, I would have ruined her meal.
So you were being chivalrous.
I guess. I mean, my meal was fine. Was it as tasty after I discovered the hair? No, it wasn't. But I don't know. It just doesn't bother me that much. But you sent back food. I think for most people, when they see the hair, proverbially or literally, metaphorically or literally, when they see a hair in the food of life, they don't know what to do. They're distraught.
Well, there it was staring me in the face. There were four of us out for dinner together, my wife and I and another couple. And my hair was stuck in the grains of rice and it was kind of cooked in. I swear to you, it was gross.
Gnarly.
It was. And there was no way I wanted to eat the remainder of the meal. And so you're left with choices, What do you do? I did, before, my wife and the other party knew what was happening, I had called over the server, a lovely young woman.
You snapped at her and screamed, "Excuse me."
Hell no.
No.
It was
Okay.
just-
You
it
didn't
was
stab.
just,
How do you get a waiter's attention when you're about to complain?
Yeah. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I just picked it up out of my plate and held it up, dangled the grains of rice. I didn't have to say anything else, quite frankly. She looked at that, looked at me. She looked mortified. I don't know if she was mortified by the hair and the grains of rice as much as maybe mortified, what is Direnfeld going to do next? She doesn't know my name, but what is this patron going to do
Am
next?
I getting my tip for something the kitchen did is the question.
And she says, "Oh my God, sir, I'm going to take your plate away right now. We're going to get you another meal." And poof, she's gone. Just as fast as that. And as fast as she's gone, she's back and says, "I'm apologetic as all get out. I am so sorry. That should never have happened. I've showed it to the chef. We're going to comp your meal. We've got a fresh meal being prepared for you immediately." And I just wanted a fresh meal. No words had really come out of my mouth yet. And I said, no issue. Like, bad things happen. I have certainly made mistakes too, and I'm not complaining. I just wanted it taken away and replaced, which you've done. So I'm good. She came back and forth 3 or 4 times apologetically, and I made it clear, no issue. And I even said, I'm not that kind of customer. You don't
these
need
things
to worry.
happen. I mean, it's a kitchen. What are you going to do? Things blow around. A bug gets in your food. It flew in the window, Like, what are you going to do?
So I wrote about it and I posted it on my Facebook page. And it stirred a lot of comments. And one of the comments was about me personally. And it started with something like, "I don't mean to be rude,
but..." When someone says, "I don't mean to be rude, but," the next thing. It's like saying, "I don't mean to be racist, but."
Exactly. Whatever's going to flow next won't be nice. And so this writer said, what was it? Something to the effect of that I was searching for compliments for myself. You're being self-congratulatory for how you handled this. That was it. So, it was a dig at me. And David, I post things that are helpful to people every day. And some of those things are personal stories because maybe there's a takeaway for someone else. And that was my reply, that I post things every day. And if you've been following me, you know that I will post personal stories and how I handle things. And it's a learning thing for others. And so that's what I posted. Anyways, holy mackerel, did that person who commented kind of get flamed. I had some 70 plus likes to my comment. That person had a lot of angry emojis. And eventually that person withdrew they deleted their own
comment deleted. Look, I want to rewind to, as much as this petty Facebook squabble is actually interesting to me. It is. I like drama.
I wasn't after the drama. And my response was informative, not angry nor demeaning. I said, hopefully people take something away from this. And in fact, many of the people did say, we appreciate when you post this stuff, Gary, because it gives us an opportunity to think of how we're going to respond to these issues.
All right. So here's what I want to talk about. I want to rewind to the hair. Because I was struck by something that happened to me on Friday, which unfortunately, for privacy reasons that aren't my privacy, other people in my life, I can't go into it too much. But the fact was, something happened to me on Friday night that was really against my ethics and values. Like, I really felt in the right. Okay? Just like you might feel when there's a hair in your food. And something happened. I fell victim to righteous indignation. I was watching a show last night where it's a reality TV show, Below Deck. And the most jerk character, who is a hothead, she is not a good person, If you do something to her, she responds 10 times worse. She's always antagonizing everyone. Someone said kind of a crappy comment to her in the finale, and she stormed off the set. And it was righteous anger because the comment that was said to her was off base, but it was only 1 out of 10 bad. And so what this person did was responded with 10 out of 10. And that's what you can do when you're faced with conflict where you feel like you're in the right, when you get the proverbial hair in your food of life.
Yes. I was definitely in the right, and I could have been self-righteous, and I could have stood up on the chair and announced it to
demanded it be taken off your bill, not left a tip, made a big stink, loudly spoke up so other customers could hear, and you ruined their meal. Like, you're kind of in the right because the hair shouldn't be in your food. But when you do all those things and you have righteous anger, you can act badly. And it reminds me of a great movie called The Big Lebowski.
Oh, I love that movie. Which part are you referring to in that?
You're going to love this because it applies in therapy so much. You're going to use this in your sessions with your clients. So the opposing bowling team, I think, cheats, okay? Or doesn't let them get away with a move. And so Walter pulls a gun on the team.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And then the dude takes Walter out because the cops are coming, basically.
What are you thinking?
And he's like, what are you doing? And Walter keeps saying, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Like, for example, that they didn't cheat, that he was wrong about them cheating.
This righteous indignation.
Righteous indignation, to which the dude responds, you're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole, which I love. I think it summarizes righteous anger. Yes, you may be justified in being upset, but if you act on it in a terrible way, you're an asshole.
That's right. That's right. And the thing is, the therapist in me sits back and says, manage your triggers.
Yeah.
Just because you're triggered, it doesn't give you the right to go off on someone. And they got a life too. And, many of these things are unintentional. No one wanted a hair in my food. No one wanted that there. Like, the cook didn't want it there. The line cook didn't want it there. The server didn't want it there. The owner didn't want it there. So, but that righteous indignation, if you've come from a background where you never felt valued, where you have been stepped on, or where you've been greatly indulged, kind of the opposite of that, you may have this strong sense of righteousness, this strong sense of entitlement, or you may have a strong need for validation. You got to manage your own triggers.
Managing your triggers. We're here with Gary Direnfeld. We're going to come back and talk more about righteous anger, one of my favorite topics. We are back with Gary Direnfeld. It's Therapy Thursdays. On a Thursday, Gary found a hair in his food, and it sparked a conversation about righteous anger, righteous indignation. Basically what happens when someone has wronged you, even in a small way, and then you respond with anger, maybe in a big way. Your angry response may be justified, but the way you respond, maybe not.
Disproportionate, where the response is now a reflection on you rather than the triggering issue. And, here's what I want to say to people. You want persons who have triggered you to concentrate on their behavior, not yours.
Yeah.
So the degree to which you manage yourself calmly and, in a sense, informationally, it creates the condition where those who have wronged you or hurt you, or the hair in the soup, it creates the conditions where they have to concentrate on their issues, not yours. That's why, it's really important to appreciate our own upbringing, our own triggers, and to manage them effectively so that our response, no matter how reasonable it is that we are upset, okay, so we're not disqualifying our feelings. We're always talking about how we're managing them, how we're responding with them. Okay. So, depending on how you were raised and what that experience was, whether you felt validated or whether you were forever indulged, it can create a greater sense of self-righteousness or self-defensiveness that can put you in a position of being over the top in terms of those responses. And, much of the feedback that I got to my post was of that nature, that it helped people self-reflect a bit more and think of how they would manage that situation. And it gave them pause to consider their behavior on a go-forward basis, which, the therapist in me, that's all I'm trying to do.
Do you see it a lot in couples fighting it out, duking it out, maybe in divorce? Like, I have a friend who I kind of dropped when I quit abusing substances and alcohol and I got sober. She was kind of a hothead, but she was only in her 20s. It wasn't a serious relationship, but she basically caught her boyfriend cheating. And so what did she do? She drove her SUV into the guy's motorcycle, totaling her SUV and his motorcycle, and she felt justified because she just got cheated on. No one deserves that. He behaved awful. She had every right to be angry, but you can't just destroy people's stuff.
And if he was anywhere near it, she could have been charged criminally for destruction of property, willful damage.
I think she was. It was a long time ago.
Assault with a weapon.
Yeah.
We really do. These are situations where we're not minimizing the feelings. We're not disqualifying the feelings. It's always a matter of how you're going to manage them such that you deal with whatever that trigger was effectively. We use the word trigger as if to say sometimes it's inappropriate that you be triggered. No, it's reasonable that we're triggered. It's reasonable. This stuff happens. It hurts us. It bothers us. It excites us. We still have to be responsible there.
Yeah, we have to manage our response. For example, my friend had every right to be angry when her boyfriend cheated on her. That's a horrible thing.
But there are those folks, David, who are prone to feeling things disproportionate to the event and responding on the basis of that disproportionate feeling. So we see...
Like pulling a gun on someone when they cheat at bowling.
That's right. We see extreme behavior. And that extreme behavior is a reflection on the person who engages in it. And so hopefully with some self-reflection, some calming techniques, people can manage themselves more effectively so that the fallout from all of this isn't even worse. People say, oh, it could never be worse. Yeah. What you do, it can make it worse. And it can make it worse for you as well as for the other person. And that's just not a good thing.
And if you're looking for sympathy, support, if you're looking
you lose it.
You lose it, right? When you behave awfully towards someone who behaved awfully towards you, you're getting in the gutter. It's a race to the bottom.
I was treated so well in that particular restaurant. The replacement meal was fine. I wasn't charged for it. I did leave a 25% tip. Why not?
Wow, 25. Gary, big spender.
Well, you know what? I got a free meal.
So they took that individual dish off.
I took that meal off, and I was treated the way I would love to be treated. And I wanted to signal that they did everything right and that I held no grudge, because I really don't. You notice I've never mentioned the name of the restaurant, and I never will, because I don't need to badmouth a business and hurt them in a sense and punish them. But a lot of people...
Do you hear what you're saying? Remember when you had the fight against Electrolux and all these... When it's a large corporation, Direnfeld's going through your throat. When it's a small restaurant, he'll protect you.
But even with the Electrolux, I still remain calm. I just made it clear what I was going to do because I wasn't getting any service. And I found every executive I can to share my story with, and I made it clear, look, if you're going to treat me this way and not meet my needs when you're so clearly in the wrong, I will escalate the complaint and my action until my needs are met. Once my needs are addressed, and again, I wasn't looking for anything disproportionate. Just fix the dryer or replace it.
So what would you have done if the waiter with the hair incident had said, "F off, Gary, you put that in the food"? What would you have done then?
I would have escalated it, not in terms of me escalating as a wild man, but I would have gone to the manager or the owner or the cook. And I doubt that.
That would be an insane thing to have happen to you.
Yeah, it's not. It's such a hypothetical. That
I mean, there are delis in New York where their shtick is to be rude to you, but even then, I think it's more a shtick than it is actual rudeness.
Do you remember Yitzi's on Eglinton?
I do. I grew up near that deli in Toronto. Yeah,
I had a cockroach in my French fries.
Oh! You just ruined all my childhood memories.
I'm using the name because the restaurant isn't there anymore. It's long closed,
yeah. Maybe it's extra protein, Gary. It's like, it's good for you.
And there was no apology. There was no make good. They brought me more fries, took away the old ones, didn't comp my meal. It was like...
Good for them.
Same different day for them.
Oh my God, a cucaracha. They're so vile. They are such vile creatures.
But but what restaurant likely doesn't have something crawling around somewhere? So again, stuff happens. Take it in stride. Get it addressed. If it doesn't get addressed, you remain calm, because as you remain calm, you maintain your credibility with the complaint, so that hopefully you can get it addressed and people aren't pointing the finger at you thinking, what did you do here to make this problem yourself? So it really is in one's self-interest as well as the interests of others to handle complaints respectfully, civilly.
Yeah, I think it's good advice. I'm still just picturing that cockroach in those French fries.
Yitzi's on Eglinton.
My parents used to visit us when we went to summer camp, and they'd bring Yitz's sandwiches, and we'd eat them. That was like the first corned beef sandwich I ever ate. That was my first love, Gary.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. So no matter how grossed out you get in that circumstance or how hurt you get in another circumstance, the degree to which you can keep your calm and bring your calm to the situation, again, people can concentrate on the situation, not on you and your response. And that's what you want. And people at the end of the day not always, but tend to be more appreciative of that. And so when they make a do-good, they're likely to go the extra mile for you, which is lovely.
Was the cockroach deep fried and battered? Like, was it a crispy cockroach? Did it crawl in after the fries were plated? I have to know.
That little sucker was alive and doing well.
Oh, it was just a living... Okay, it crawled in your fries. It wasn't cooked with the fries.
No, it wasn't cooked with the fries.
You've ruined my childhood. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate you coming here. What a great discussion.
Oh, the things you get me talking about, David. I love it.
What a pleasure. Gary Direnfeld, Therapy Thursdays on a Thursday. You can find out more about Gary at yoursocialworker.com. Coming up in just a moment, it's conspiracy theories with Nathan Radke, and we are going to discuss what the Smurfs and what pinball has to do with satanic panic. Now, that headline alone is salacious, but we're actually going to look at various cases of moral panic, what happened, how it happens, and how to avoid it. All right, we are here with a conspiracy theory expert who's going to answer the question I know you've been thinking. What do the Smurfs and pinball say about the devil? He's a cultural history professor at Humber College in Ontario. He's a podcaster, got a great show about conspiracy theories called the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. His name is Nathan Radke. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
You heard my false start introduction. How was my second try compared?
Oh, the second time was brilliant. Fantastic. I mean, you've asked the question I think we've all been asking all of the time.
Every day as a kid, my mother would say, what does the devil and the Smurfs have to do with pinball or whatever I said? Who knows? I'm botching it now. Not important. Okay, moral panic. It's something we've discussed before, but I would like you to define it because for anyone who hasn't heard you on the show, or even me who has a short-term memory loss problem, long-term memory loss problem, speaking problem, who knows? What is moral panic? And tell me about an early example of it.
All right. So once in a while, in fact, often enough that it's actually a bit embarrassing, a big group of people will get really frightened and really angry about something that later on in retrospect looks absurd and ridiculous. And the content might be different. Comic books, the effects of comic books on kids was a big one. Rock and roll in the 50s, kids eating Tide Pods, Dungeons and Dragons causing insanity, TikTok giving kids Tourette's. Do you remember back in 2016 when everybody was terrified of clowns?
Yes, and they were saying that like clowns actually murder. They weren't just scary in the movies. They were really dangerous.
Yeah, and it was all over social media. So the content is all totally different, but the thing they all have in common is that they're all examples of what's called moral panic, an idea explored by the sociologist Stanley Cohen in the 1970s. And all moral panics, regardless of what they're about, they all share certain characteristics. One, they all have just at least a tiny kernel of truth to them, a little tiny little bit of truth in there that the lies and the exaggerations kind of hold on to. That small element of truth gets exaggerated and distorted. The mass media, of course, picks it up and runs with it. An outsider group is identified as a threat to social cohesion, and then that outsider group gets scapegoated as the cause of either a real social problem or just a perceived social problem. And then we're off and running, and then people are, panicking and crying havoc.
I think the Salem witch trials are a perfect example of it. The real kernel of truth is women want to be treated equally and do whatever they want. And the panic is, well, that means they're witches. Isn't that what, it's a tale as old as time, I feel. It's a part of us as a society. Every now and again, scapegoating. It's one of our great hobbies. I don't like what this says about humanity, but we do it.
No, absolutely. And of course, now with mass media, what was a localized event in Salem could now spread out to an entire countryside or even worldwide. And so what we'll do today is we'll look at a couple of absolutely ridiculous moral panics, and then we'll talk about like what this means about us, and also why is this a danger? Why is this a problem? So we're going to start off in 1942. There's a squad of police in New York City. They're raiding all these dark and shady establishments that were just flaunting their law-breaking ways. The proprietors get arrested. The contraband is seized. People are kicking down doors. And that contraband, of course, pinball machines.
Pinball machines.
Pinball machines.
The outrage. Think of the children, Nathan. What if they play pinball? They'll start, I don't know, worshiping little metal balls that they have to pay 25 cents to get dispensed. I don't know. What is wrong with pinball in the eyes of these police?
Would somebody please think of the children? So in the 1940s, this moral panic had started to form that pinball machines were a clear and present danger to the moral fabric of American society.
Okay, makes perfect sense.
Well, it makes, again, there's that tiny little bit of a kernel of truth because they were associated with gambling parlors. And of course, gambling parlors in the 40s in New York is going to be associated with the mafia. And so that's all it takes in order to come up with just the belief that, so having kids play pinball is going to cause a rise in juvenile delinquency and crime.
Is there an undercurrent of control here? Like the parents say, don't play the pinball, the kids play the pinball, therefore it's the devil. Like, is there an element of that?
I mean, that's always in the mix. Because often these moral panics, including this one and the next one, have to do with one generation being concerned about what the next generation is up to. And what makes this one even sharper, of course, is 1942. And it's a very specific time in American history. They had just gotten into World War II. And so Mayor LaGuardia of New York City said, quote, "It was infinitely preferable that the metal in these evil contraptions be manufactured into arms and bullets, which can be used to destroy our foreign enemies."
Okay, so really they were grossly affecting the war effort. They couldn't create enough bullets because all that metal was being used in the tiny pinballs.
That's right. There'd be some guy up in his P-38 and he'd pull his trigger and no bullets would come out because all of that metal was bouncing around pinball games in New York City. It was a disgrace.
Makes perfect sense.
And what's amazing is, as silly as it sounds to us, this panic actually lasted for a while. This panic had legs. In 1960, JFK is running for president, and Republicans tried to slander him by claiming that he was involved in the pinball racket.
Imagine. I'm just thinking of the Trump trial right now and Biden and just the state of American politics. I can't even imagine a day when a president, I don't know, condoning pinball, being involved in the pinball trade would be the thing that would get him in trouble. It's just wild to me.
I mean, clearly a very different time. In the 1970s, there was a debate because the pinball ban was still in effect. So in the 1970s, there was a debate about removing that pinball ban. And a New York City councilman said, quote, "On the surface, it appears to be an innocent sort of device, but it will bring rampant vice and gambling back to the city." Rampant.
It's sick that it's funny to us now, and then that was very real. Imagine I was Tommy, I was a pinball wizard.
Right. I mean, you'd be public enemy number one. But of course, I mean, it's understandable because in the 1970s, of course, New York was renowned for having almost no crime or corruption at all, as I recall.
Yes.
And so something like pinball machines could have really just tipped the scales over into chaos. And now eventually, because it was ridiculous, the ban gets removed, but pretty much just in time for all the pinball games to get replaced with Pac-Man and Pong and all these other video games. And then, of course, those video games would kind of wipe out the pinball games for a while anyway.
And Pac-Man was a family man. He had Mrs. Pac-Man. This is a model nuclear American family.
He had Ms. Pac-Man.
Oh, boy.
And so then, in part maybe because of that, we see video games then go off and form their own moral panic, and that carries on for decades, and we still see it today, and gets blamed from everything from violence in school to depression to everything.
She's kind of sexy, Ms. Pac-Man. I'm looking her up now.
Well, she had that little bow.
Yeah.
And otherwise was entirely identical.
I'm surprised, in the American right, this is recently, and mini version of Moral Panic, they went after M&Ms. They were like, this is so funny, because the M&Ms, they made them less sexy or something, and the conservatives are like, this is left-wing politics gone mad.
Right, and that's another great example, because on the surface, it sounds like literally the most ridiculous thing you could ever be concerned about. There's a mascot that has changed their shoes. This is indicative of some wider evil spreading through society. But that's always how a moral panic operates. It's like, no, there's this group that's trying to undermine and destroy us from within. And so something like, oh, they changed the shoes on this mascot. No. That's part of this larger program in order to try to take down society and collapse it.
And I may be botching the right's argument, like Tucker Carlson's argument. And to be honest, I don't give two shits about Tucker Carlson. But what I think his argument was he was somehow blaming it on LGBTQ people, like gender neutral pronoun. I don't even know what his half-baked theory was, but he had his scapegoat, queer people. Yeah. And somehow M&M mascots meant that, I don't know, children were being forced to be gay. Like, I don't know what their argument was, but it's a silly little example. But yeah, it just comes to mind, and we're talking about video games and Ms. Pac-Man, and I'm just thinking of the sexy M&M.
Well, I mean, it is a silly example, but with like deadly serious effects.
Yeah.
And this is why it's important to go back and look at these ridiculous things that we've done in the past, so that when we do these ridiculous things now, we can recognize the pattern and say, uh-oh, I think that you have taken something, wildly exaggerated, spun it out of control, found a marginalized group to scapegoat, and now you're trying to get people to go after them.
And I think this leads very nicely into looking into the past at a particularly ridiculous and, dare I say, fun example of a panic called the Great Demonic Smurf Panic. This happened a little bit after the 1942 pinball panic. So when we come back, we will discuss that with Nathan Radke, host of The Uncover Up and conspiracy theory expert. We are here talking about moral panic and conspiracy theories with cultural history professor and host of a fantabulous, which is definitely a real word, podcast called The Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Conspiracy Cast! I don't know what the hell's wrong with me today, Nathan.
Wow. So yeah, cast. That's...
I was thinking of my catheter, which I don't have.
You were thinking catheters, maybe?
I don't know. Kathy, Catherine, who knows. Nathan Radke, welcome to the show. We were talking about moral panic. We were talking about pinball being the demon's invention that will just drive children and society to ruin. And in general, we were talking about moral panics. I want to zoom all the way to the 1980s because this one is just so absurd. When we think Smurfs, we think lovable, friendly children's cartoons. But in the 80s, not everyone was thinking that, were they?
Yeah, let's turn up the heat on this a little bit. And by turn up the heat, I mean let's talk about hellfire and Satan.
Yes.
So this is from my childhood, 1980s. And the 1980s was an odd time for toys because we had Reagan in the White House, and the Reagan administration sort of really was into reducing regulations on things. One of the things they reduced regulation on was Saturday morning cartoons. They didn't have to be educational. Basically, they just turned into advertisements for toys and cereal. That's all it was. And so my childhood was filled with all of these toys like He-Man and the Smurfs, and they all had toys and they all had other things that you would buy, and they were all these massive, like, corporate entities. And there were people who started to look at this and see something really disturbing, not disturbing in the commercialism of it, but disturbing in the fact that maybe these little toys were actually the mouthpieces for Satan.
Tracks. Say no more. That's all the evidence I need.
I mean, how much more do I have to say? It's so obvious. So I want to talk about the work of the redundantly named Philip Phillips, who was a pastor and an author of Turmoil in the Toy Box, Saturday Morning Mind Control, and Dinosaurs, the Bible, Barney, and Beyond.
Can I get that one again? That sounds like a great book.
Dinosaurs, the Bible, Barney, and Beyond.
Wow.
So according to Phillips, he's in a toy store and he sees this He-Man figure, which was an old toy line from the 1980s. This character Skeletor,
Yes.
who was this buff guy, like fur underwear and a skull for a face.
Skeleton, Satan, society's ruined. I mean, it's 4 simple steps. Skeletor, skeleton, Satan, society's ruined.
It's all coming together. So he's driving around with this toy in the backseat, and he says that God talks to him and says, hey, you've got to tell the world that Satan is getting into homes through these toys. And so the argument that he makes is, in a lot of these toys, there was magic, because kids like magic because it's sort of fun and, you use your imagination. But what Philip said was, when the kids then act out the magic rituals that they saw in the cartoons, they're actually casting real spells. And so this is a way for demons to enter into the home. And in addition, as I mentioned with Skeletor's tiny fur pants, a lot of the He-Man characters were scantily clad, which could cause kids to have impure thoughts when playing with them.
Of course.
Now, I should also say that the good pastor also said that E.T. was very sexual.
I mean, E.T., that sexy feller, who doesn't have a thing for him, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, which says, I think, more about this guy than anything else. And according to the panic mongers, all of these toys were also a way of introducing children to, quote, Eastern religions and philosophies.
But aren't those
Yoda?
atheistic? Like, isn't Buddhism, there is no God? Like, it makes no sense.
But if you're in the 80s and you're a Christian fundamentalist, if it isn't Christian, it is by definition satanic. It's a binary system. There are only those two things. So Yoda, Zen Buddhist. Care Bears, not only communist, but they were Eastern mystics who channeled chi through their bellies when they shot that rainbow thing out.
Well, I can see shooting rainbows out of the lower part of your body is sexual, but not for the reasons they're saying.
No, and also, I mean, the furry community, I think, probably has their own take on the Care Bears. But stories started to spread in certain religious communities that supported this narrative of satanic toys. And some of my favorite ones are about the Smurfs. So in some religious communities in the 1980s, there was a story circulating that the toys themselves were coming to life and biting children. Now, these stories led to mass Smurf burnings, where people would get all of their kids' Smurfs and bring them together in front of the church and light them on fire in what I can only assume was the worst smell on earth.
Sounds like a good party.
And there was another very specific story where allegedly a child brought their Smurf to a church service, and the power of the church service was strong enough that the Smurf started to shake and quiver and then started swearing, but then jumped out of the child's arms and ran out of the church, unable to confront the holy and sacred.
I believe that story. I have all the evidence I need.
Yeah, again, makes perfect sense. Cabbage Patch Kids were also part of a demonic conspiracy to prevent people from having children. As late as 1996, I found a newsletter how the exit of trolls and dolls was followed by the entrance of babies, in which the Advanced Training Institute, which is a Christian sect, they argued that Cabbage Patch Kids would actually prevent babies from emerging from their mothers. And only once you burned the dolls would the babies immediately emerge.
I mean, if they published it, I believe it. That's how peer-reviewed scholarly research works, right?
Yeah. And I mean, all these stories have a bunch of things in common. And one is that it shows that we will believe the most ridiculous things if they reinforce the things that we already believe.
I feel like that's the undercurrent of almost every conversation I have with you and your colleague, Lee Kunla.
Yeah, and because that's such an important thing to realize, because it makes us a little bit more humble, because we tend to get very certain about the things that we believe. And and you and I have talked about this over the years, that there's so many psychological tricks that our brains will play on us to kind of protect our own beliefs and to protect us from evidence that goes against the things that we want to believe. And this is the danger. Because we have these tendencies, there are people who will sort of hack into our brains that will manipulate us because of these tendencies. And this is actually a clear and present danger. Because our beliefs shape our worldviews shape our actions. If our beliefs are shaped on nonsense, then our actions are often pointless at best and hazardous at worst. I mean, something again like the Salem witch trial, we can see where this goes when the panic mongers get us angry enough and frightened enough, we stop thinking clearly. And as Voltaire said, if you can get people to believe in absurdity, you can get them to commit an atrocity.
Look, I'm sure anyone listening, your religion's true. I don't mean to offend the religious, but this is my primary issue with religion. If we're in the business of accepting things without evidence, if we're in the business of accepting things on faith, what couldn't you justify on faith? And, if we can believe these absurd things, we can believe other absurd things that can cause us to act very badly and hurtful towards others.
Yeah, and of course, that isn't a slight against religious people. There are a lot of very rational religious people. But there is this element, it's when it becomes fundamentalist that it becomes more likely that somebody is going to be convinced of something this ridiculous. And you might ask, why are the panic mongers doing this? What's the purpose of it? Sometimes it's very clear cut. They're just trying to benefit by selling books or selling speaking gigs. And we see that a lot. We see that a lot in the 1980s with this satanic panic. But sometimes it's a political motivation. Sometimes it's a deliberate way of engineering a social change in a society to get people to turn on a marginalized group for the benefit of someone else's political career. And as horrifying as that sounds, we see it over and over and over again. We have a responsibility as people with brains to make ourselves more resistant to that kind of manipulation.
If one group can sell you something pretty ridiculous, if they can sell you a version of the truth that, I don't know, I was reading an article on this and they said that the Force from Star Wars was really witchcraft. If they can get you to believe ridiculous stuff like that, including the Smurfs are somehow demons, and it goes against what most people believe, they then become the person that can sell you truth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they can sell you a narrative and they might get you to believe something completely benign now, but you're more likely to believe the next thing they say. And in that way, they can manipulate you.
Yeah. And when we're afraid, when we're panicking, we don't think as clearly, we're easier to manipulate. There's really never a good time for panic. I mean, think about something like an emergency plane landing. Even in that situation, which is a genuine threat, we're better off not panicking and keeping clear heads and doing things rationally.
But how do you tell someone not to panic? Like, I feel like never in the history of panicking has screaming at somebody, don't panic, made them not panic.
Right. Yeah, the following conversation has never happened. Hey, you, don't panic. And then the second person says, oh, good point.
It's like never in the history of calming down has you screaming calm down at someone caused them to calm down. It's sort of like that.
No, and so that's why it's really hard to fight back against these. And why it's good to study them in the past, because when we recognize them early before we get too swept up in them, then we are still thinking clearly. But once you're swept up, it becomes extremely difficult to get somebody out.
Nathan, what a pleasure it was talking to you today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Nathan Radke is a cultural history professor at Humber College in Ontario, Canada. He's got a podcast. Check it out. It's called The Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. He digs into conspiracy theories with his very handsome co-host, Dr. Lee Kunla. And up next is Tony Five, our foreign correspondent. Tony is going to share some provincial news from the various provinces of England. We are here with Tony 5. We have basically run out of things to talk about, and coming off of yesterday, we're going to talk about the news. He joins us from Somerville, Summergate, Somerset upon Time, or whatever. Why are all your cities named dash upon dash something, Tony?
Yeah, I'm from Brighton today, David.
Oh, summer, bright, it's the same thing, really.
Well, kind of, yeah. Potatoes, peppers. So, yeah, I'm in Brighton today, David, and carrying on from the theme that we did quite recently, Proverbial News with Tony 5.
No, you wanted to call it provincial news, and then I said yesterday.
I know, and I thought that was even funnier because you got so annoyed because I knew I didn't say it, David. I got you cheeky little monkey. I got you.
You did get me, but for those who have no idea what we're talking about, Tony's like, we're going to do the provincial news. And I said, well, yesterday you called it the Proverbial Provincial News. Then you said, proverbial makes no sense. And I said, you're the one who said it. That's what happened. It's not that interesting.
It was quite interesting, to be fair. But yes, you're right.
So I've got some news from England to cover with you.
Okay, hit me.
Currently at auction for $12,000. A young...
I'm in.
Yeah, I'll take two. Is a sculpture, which is a pottery goat. It is a 55-year-old...
David, nothing. I'm in.
You don't even understand what this pottery goat is, Tony.
David, did you not hear the word pottery goat?
I did, but it gets even better than that.
Hit me, go on.
It's unique, according to the auction house. It was sculpted 55 years ago, and it was sculpted by none other than a young King Charles.
No way. I'll have it. I'll take it. Put it in the shopping basket. I'll take it. Is it on Amazon Prime?
It's very small. It's palm-sized. It doesn't look great, but it is a pottery goat created by Her Majesty the King or whatever.
I mean, it's historic, David.
Can you describe it for those listening?
So it's a large white man with an absolutely huge hand holding it looks like a small goat, but in the sort of colorification of a hot dog.
Yeah, it looks like it could be in a McDonald's Happy Meal, doesn't it?
It looks like a hot dog, I think. But it looks great. I mean, the king is multi-talented, my friend. Multi-talented, as I could show you. Absolutely amazing.
This is good news stuff. All right.
Yeah, with very good news. Yeah, I like it. I think it's fantastic. So, yeah, do you want to hear my news locally, David?
Yeah, I got a few more, but we'll trade off. Go ahead. What do you got?
Okay, so we're now talking about my destination tomorrow. So I'll be getting the train from Brighton to Luton. Luton, locally known as the arsehole of England, god-awful place. Very much the Bakersfield of the UK.
Isn't there an airport there? Isn't there London Luton or whatever?
There is.
Yeah.
It's London Luton, but you're about 35 miles from London.
Okay.
So they're already lying to you when you get to the airport. But it starts off with the lie and it gets worse.
I see. It's like saying you're from New York City, but being from Buffalo or something.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, do people from, you got Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, that's about 30 miles away. Actually less, maybe 15 miles away. But you got the Hudson River dividing it, and it's in a different state, and it's a dump. It's an industrial wasteland.
Yeah, so I mean, one of their major, it's the top 3 news stories that's happened this weekend is Coldplay singer gives Luton woman with arthritis a lift to festival.
Gold-plated singer? I missed the beginning.
Coldplay.
Go, like Chris Martin. Okay, yeah. Okay, so he gave an uplifting performance to an arthritic woman.
Well, he picked her up in his car and he took her to the festival.
Great. So Chris Martin drives. Chris Martin drives.
Correct. The story you're seeing is Chris Martin drives and a woman who's got osteoarthritis was attending a festival.
Love it. Okay, very, very thrilling stuff.
I mean, if that's not front page news, I don't know what is, David.
This one you'll like. This one also from England. Well, I guess from the United States, considering where they are, but it's from Harry and Meghan. They're going to embark on another tour after the high-profile success of their, quote, Nigeria visit. So their Nigeria visit went so well that they're going to do a world tour now. I just feel like if you're doing a world tour, especially if you're a Western royalty person or former royalty, who knows what, you shouldn't mark the success of your tour based on how much the Nigerians like you, because they're not really your target audience, are they?
Not really. To be fair, when considering you're from the UK and America, Nigerian isn't your demographic.
I mean, nothing against the Nigerians. I just feel like if Meghan and Harry are trying to forecast how good their tour is going to be, how they're received in Nigeria, and not a great indicator there.
No, I don't really understand the vitriol aimed against them. I think it's very unfair, but I don't think they're doing themselves any favors either. So I don't know. It just all seems very, very strange to me.
It's kind of like a leave Britney alone situation. Like, I didn't really care about Britney Spears, but just leave her alone, you know? Like, leave them alone. Let them be jerks. Let them be entitled rich brats who don't want to have anything to do with their family. Who cares? You know, who cares?
Exactly. It just doesn't. It's very much like a non-news story that's just found its way onto the fronts of these internet pages. But that's fine.
Abolish the monarchy.
Abolish the monarchy, hashtag. So, driver facing jail after police found £19 million of cocaine in a lorry at an M1 service station near Luton whilst he bought KFC.
KFC is an important note, yeah.
Exactly. So the fact that he was buying KFC is the most amazing thing part of it. So this guy had £19 million of cocaine. He could have gone to any 5-star, we're talking Michelin star.
You mean pounds as in British currency. You don't mean 19 million physical pounds, because that's a lot of cocaine.
I'm talking 19. No, that's a big truck. No, I'm talking 19 million pounds sterling of cocaine.
How much is a pound of cocaine? We're going to do some basic research here. Street prices of a cocaine. Oh, wow. This is some serious stuff. United States, okay. In the UK, per gram, a cocaine is 62 pounds per gram, and there's 1,000 grams in a kilo.
Yes.
Okay. So
he had 156 kilograms of cocaine.
So 62,000 pounds is a kilo. And you were saying 19 million? We do
19 million. He had 156 kilograms. So let's see if that works out or whether the Google has got it wrong.
I think inflation is bad. I have 306 kilograms according to my math.
Oh, inflation is bad. No. Sorry. They found another 36 kilograms in his glove compartment.
So he had about 500 to 600 pounds of cocaine, which is not 19 million pounds of cocaine is like more money than the GDP of the UK. Like that's a lot of cocaine.
Well, it says here, a drugs expert determined that the total potential street value of the drugs to be 19.2 million pounds.
Potential. That's if you sell it in small quantity. Yeah, we're buying in bulk here, Tony.
I'm talking eBay type pricing, Now, they always do you with the PayPal, David. Always do me with PayPal.
If, pardon my potential racist thinking, although I am judging those who have this racist thinking.
Okay, chicken. Was he black?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Are the comment section on the online newspaper post, are they a nightmare just making fun of those who stereotypically like fried chicken?
No, they don't have any comment. On these things, I think I'm probably the only person who reads this, and very, very old people. But no, there is no comment section on these, unfortunately.
Tony, what's your favorite food?
No, a chicken. So anyway, and you do know that I did tell you yesterday that they're thinking of bringing conscription back, right?
Yeah, for what though? Like, are they going to invade Russia? Isn't conscription in response to a war? Like, even the United States, where conscription's on the books, like they're only going to do it if it's World War III.
I think it's one of these pledges that the government makes to think that everybody's going to think, oh my God, it's the best thing to do, but nobody really understands.
Because if they're not talking mandatory service, which many countries have, if they're just talking conscription, it's just a PR stunt, because unless there's a war, they're not going to conscript. And if there was a war, they would conscript anyway.
Correct. So it's 1 year of army duties, army service. Or if you don't want to do it, you have to do 18 months of volunteering service, which I guess is something like picking up trash, cleaning up KFCs, whatever, something like that locally. That's the option. But somebody went on the radio and asked the government, so if they don't do it, what happens? And they didn't have an answer. So how they would force people to do it is unbelievable. That would be quite interesting to find out how they would genuinely force people to do it.
Are they going to throw people in jail like they did during World War II or Vietnam in the U.S.? Like, I don't see it. There's no purpose for the conscription.
And can you imagine in the jail, it would be populated and supervised by the people that were conscripted to do it. That would be amazing. The circle of life. Right, I've got one more a provincial news story for you, David, which I hope you like. There's a gentleman called Simon Germer, David. I want to know, why do you think Simon Germer is the top 3 story in Luton today?
No idea, Tony. Let me know.
He's the best biscuit dunker in Britain.
Wow. What an accolade.
And on that note, David, it's a goodbye from me.
And that concludes our time with Tony Five, expert biscuit dunker in the land of England. That's our show. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm not too busy for you. Thanks for listening.